Okay, welcome back to Landing the Moon. I'm Max, that's Blake, and oh man, this week handed us a lot to work with.
That's one way to put it.
So get this, May 28th, Blue Origin's NG-4 New Glenn blows up on the pad during a static fire test, destroys the vehicle, torches LC-36, their only orbital launch pad.
Their only pad.
Their only pad. 6 days after the FAA cleared them post-NG-3. 6 days.
And Blue Moon Mk.1 cargo demo was supposed to fly on that rocket. So now NASA is scrambling for an alternate launcher. And Spaceflight Now reported NASA Administrator Isaacman is already pushing to decouple the lander from New Glenn entirely.
Totally fine. Normal Tuesday stuff.
Right, except the lander was physically designed around New Glenn's 7-meter fairing. So just swap the rocket is not as simple as it sounds. That's what we're going to pressure test today.
Wait for it, because the alternative launcher options, they each have a dead end in their own special way.
And Blue Origin CEO Dave Limp is pledging a return to flight by end of 2026. CNBC reported Isaacman floated 2028 for full pad restoration. That 2-year gap between those estimates is worth examining.
Yeah, we'll get into the math on that.
We'll also trace the whole dependency chain. Blue Moon Mk.1 cargo demo feeds Blue Moon Mk.2 human certification. Miss one step and the 2028 crewed landing gets wobbly fast. And we close with predictions. On the record, falsifiable ones. Root cause disclosure, contract mods, pad progress. No wriggle room. Starting with the explosion itself. What actually happened on May 28th?
Okay, so picture this. May 28th, 9 p.m. at Cape Canaveral, Blue Origin's New Glenn 7BE4 engines fires up for what's supposed to be a routine pre-launch static fire. NG-4 was days away from flying. And then within seconds, the 322-foot rocket just collapses in on itself. A fireball you could see from miles.
NASA Spaceflight reported the overpressure event destroyed the vehicle, toppled a lightning mast, and wrecked the transporter erector. The main launch tower was still standing, but had bent metal beams. That's the physical toll.
And the part that matters for everything that follows, LC-36 is Blue Origin's only orbital launch pad. There is no Pad B to fall back on.
Right, so let's be precise about what Blue Origin has actually disclosed. The root cause of the explosion is still under investigation. They've said very little publicly.
Basically nothing. Jeff Bezos posted that it was a very rough day, which, yeah, understatement of the decade, and that they'd rebuild. That's it.
Meanwhile, CNBC reported NASA Administrator Isaacman toured the pad and told reporters the launch pad may not be fully restored until 2028. Blue Origin is disputing that framing, targeting return to flight before end of 2026.
Sure, end of 2026, from a pad that had a lightning mast fall over and a transporter erector turned into scrap metal?
Look, Tech Times covered this. The credibility of the year-end target depends less on building another rocket than restoring that pad, and those are two very different problems on very different timelines.
Oh, and wait, this is actually the second consecutive New Glenn failure. NG-3 in April, FAA grounded it after a cryogenic leak froze a hydraulic line and stranded AST SpaceMobile's Bluebird 7 satellite in the wrong orbit.
9 corrective actions mandated. Blue Origin got FAA clearance to fly again on May 22nd.
6 days before blowing up the pad? 6 days.
That's an extraordinary sequence.
2 missions, 2 failures, 1 pad, 0 backup. And now NASA's Artemis timeline is sitting on top of all of this. Gizmodo put it bluntly, the Blue Moon Mk.1 lander demo flight was supposed to launch on New Glenn this fall.
Wow. Which raises a question that sounds simple but really isn't. If New Glenn is out, why not just strap Blue Moon onto a different rocket?
Right, that's the obvious move, except...
It's not as obvious at all once you look at the hardware.
Okay, so here's the core problem, and it's a geometry problem. Blue Moon Mk.1 was purpose-built for New Glenn's 7-meter fairing. That's not a preference, that's the architecture.
Right, and Falcon Heavy's fairing is 5.2 meters.
1.8 meters difference. Think of it this way. You designed a sofa specifically for your living room doorway. Now someone's asking you to move it through a doorway that's 2 feet narrower. The sofa doesn't negotiate.
Okay, I like that analogy, but walk me through the math on what actually changes. Blue Origin has never publicly stated Blue Moon's outer diameter.
They haven't. That's the silence you should be paying attention to. What we do know, Blue's own website says the lander was designed for the 7-meter fairing specifically. Gunter's space page lists the primary outer diameter at 3.08 meters, but a 3-meter core can still have solar panels, structural trusses, landing legs, all kinds of geometry that pushes the envelope diameter way beyond that.
So when Blue Origin says the lander was optimized for New Glenn, that's not just a marketing line.
No, it's John Kalouris, Blue's SVP of Lunar Permanence during the NG3 broadcast, saying having the same company's launch vehicle and lander let them optimize the entire stack. And then, we've gotten a lot more performance out of our lander thanks to New Glenn. That's a direct quote from Spaceflight Now.
Okay, so a launcher swap doesn't just mean rewriting a contract. It means losing performance margin you already banked.
And the backup rockets don't help either. Vulcan Centaur's fairing is also in the 5.4-meter class. Same problem, different logo.
So what's left? Starship has the volume.
Starship has the volume. Starship is also still in development, and Starship is operated by Blue Origin's direct HLS competitor. You want me to keep going?
No, I think I got it. The two obvious alternatives share the same fairing ceiling, and the one alternative that doesn't has its own set of problems that are deeply awkward.
NASA Administrator Isaacman actually said it straight out at a CNBC CEO summit. In terms of real heavy lift, you've got SpaceX and Blue Origin, and one of them is down a pad. That was from Spaceflight Now.
Where does that assumption come from that this gets solved quickly?
It doesn't, and that's where the pad infrastructure question gets even messier, because Falcon Heavy's pad has a whole separate problem that has nothing to do with fairing diameter.
Right, and nobody's talking about who pays for any of it.
So the fairing math is brutal, but flip it around, even if you somehow squeezed Blue Moon onto a Falcon Heavy, you've got a completely different problem waiting you on the pad.
The propellant issue.
Yes, Blue Moon's BE-7 engine runs on liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. Falcon Heavy burns RP-1, kerosene, and LOX. SpaceX's pads at 39A have zero LH-2 infrastructure.
SpaceX has never needed it. Their entire vehicle stack runs on either kerosene or methane. LH-2 requires dedicated storage tanks, insulated transfer lines, specialized ground support equipment. You can't boat that on a pad in a weekend.
Or even a month. Isaacman pointed to Falcon Heavy in that Fox Business interview according to Spaceflight Now, and yet his own agency's notes acknowledge SpaceX pads aren't equipped to handle a liquid hydrogen lander. So who's paying for the upgrade?
That's the question nobody's answered publicly. And here's the part I keep coming back to, Max. What's the contract vehicle? NASA can't just call Elon and say, hey, mind adding liquid hydrogen plumbing to LC-39A? There has to be a procurement action, a cost estimate, an agreement on who owns the infrastructure after.
Oh, totally. I'm sure that paperwork writes itself real fast.
Historically, no. And SpaceX has no commercial incentive here. They're not getting paid to launch Blue Moon on Falcon Heavy yet. They're being asked to fund pad modifications that benefit a direct HLS competitor.
Which is, okay, get this, Blue Origin and SpaceX are literally competing for the same NASA Human Landing System contracts. Asking Blue Origin to modify their pad so Blue Moon can fly is like asking Ford to retrofit their factory to ship Chevys. Contractually possible, commercially absurd.
That's not wrong. And the competitive dynamic goes the other way, too. Every month a Blue Moon Mk.1 demo slips is a month SpaceX's Starship HLS stays ahead on schedule optics.
So SpaceX's incentive to move fast on this is basically zero.
The math on the pad modification, cost, timeline, who owns it, none of that has been put on the table. Gizmodo flagged that NASA has no intention of letting the Artemis timeline slip, but wanting something and having a funded plan for it are two different things.
Bold of them to distinguish those.
So the alternative launcher path is blocked by physics, blocked by infrastructure, and blocked by competitive dynamics, which actually brings us right back to the question everyone's been avoiding. Can Blue Origin just fix LC-36 fast enough that none of this matters?
So, quick question. Does Blue Origin actually have the hardware to fly again, or is this just CEO optimism?
Both, possibly. The rocket hardware situation is less bad than you'd expect.
Right, so according to CEO Dave Limp's post, a Blue Glenn booster called Never Tell Me the Odds and 3 GS2 upper stages were in the integration facility, all in good shape. The flight hardware survived.
So the bottleneck is the pad, not the rocket.
Exactly, and that is actually the counterintuitive part of this whole situation. Blue Origin has rockets ready to stack, they just have nowhere to launch them from.
Which makes the end of 2026 RTF claim worth pressure testing. Let's walk through the math. SpaceX's SLC-40 explosion in September 2016, comparable pad damage. Reconstruction ran the better part of a year. First Falcon 9 flew from that rebuilt pad in December 2017.
11 months of construction, and SpaceX had a backup pad at 39A the whole time. Blue Origin has 0 backups.
0.
Like none, 0 pads. 1 pad, 1 rocket program, 1 chance.
And NASA Administrator Isaacman, who actually toured LC-36, told CNBC he thinks full pad restoration could realistically take until 2028 based on historical data from comparable rebuilds.
Wait, so the NASA Administrator is saying 2028, and the Blue Origin CEO is saying before December 31st, 2026?
That gap is not a rounding error.
2 years apart. One of them is very wrong.
In fairness, Limp did flag some genuine reasons for optimism. According to Spaceflight Now, the propellant farm, the oxygen, LH2, and LNG tanks all survived. Those are long lead items. The support tower can be repaired in place rather than torn down.
So it's not a total rebuild, but the transporter erector is mangled, the lightning tower is gone, and they're switching to a vertical assembly concept they were already planning, which adds qualification work.
Tech Times reported that the year-end goal requires investigation, corrective actions, pad repairs, a new handling method qualification, and FAA sign-off, all converging simultaneously.
That's a lot of work streams for 6 months.
And if the pad slips past December, the Blue Moon Mk.1 demo has nowhere to fly from, which means the whole Artemis certification sequence
doesn't start. That's where this gets serious. So, with that 2-year gap in the back of our minds, here's what actually scares me. The Mk.1 demo, Endurance, isn't just a box-checking exercise.
Walk me through it.
NASA's own certification sequence requires Mk.1 to fly first. You can't human rate Mk.2 without the cargo demo data. No Endurance, no crewed lander. Full stop.
And Endurance has to do real work. Precision landing within 100 meters of the South Pole target, BE-7 engine performance data in actual lunar gravity, cryogenic propulsion validated end-to-end.
Which means you cannot skip it. You cannot compress it. Compressing Mk.1 doesn't save time. It just moves the risk onto the crew.
So, let's trace the critical path. Gizmodo noted Endurance was supposed to fly this fall on New Glenn. That's gone. Isaacman said Spaceflight Now reported he wants the lander kept available for a 2027 Artemis 3 low Earth orbit test.
Right. So now you need a launcher that can actually fly that mission. And you need it to resolve the fairing geometry, the LH2 pad infrastructure, all of it.
That's 4 open questions needing answers at the same time. Any one of them breaks the chain.
And this is where the math gets brutal. Isaacman wants the 2028 landing. For that to happen, Endurance has to fly, land, and return certification data, probably 2026 or very early 2027. Then the 2027 low Earth orbit test. Then Artemis 3 in 2028.
That's 3-step sequence with 0 schedule margin, and step 1 still doesn't have a rocket.
Oh, and the pad that was supposed to launch it might not be usable until 2028, which is also when they want to land on the moon.
So the launch pad restoration date and the crewed landing date are potentially the same year. That's not a schedule. That's a paradox.
Dude, exactly. And look, neither of us is saying 2028 is impossible, but Isaacman is holding the line publicly and simultaneously describing a situation where every single dependency is unresolved.
The honest answer is nobody knows yet. The launcher question, the pad question, the fairing question, they compound each other.
Which is why next week gets really interesting. We're going on record with actual predictions, checkable ones. All right, predictions time, and we go on record here. Blake, I'll go first. My call, Blue Origin does not publicly name an alternative launcher by July 17th. They're still deep in the New Glenn 4 root cause investigation, and according to Tech Times, that root cause hasn't even been disclosed yet.
That's actually the most falsifiable thing you've said all episode. What's your logic?
They've got hardware survivors, boosters, upper stages, sitting in the integration facility right now. Their whole posture is, we're fixing the pad or flying by December. Naming an alternative launcher is basically admitting the pad won't be ready. They're not going to do that publicly by mid-July.
I'll push back slightly. Spaceflight Now reported Isaacman already used the phrase decoupling the lander from the launch vehicle. That's not a hint, that's a policy signal. I think NASA issues a formal contract modification language before July 17th. Not a named rocket, but language that opens the door.
Okay, that's a narrower bet. I'll take it.
My second prediction, LC-36 shows zero structural repair progress visible to the public before August. Blue Origin confirmed the transporter erector is destroyed. That's not a weld job, that's a rebuild. And CNBC reported Isaacman floated 2028 as a possible pad restoration date.
So your prediction is nothing happens?
Visible, confirmed progress. Not internal work, actual milestones they disclose. I would bet against it before August.
I'll go the other way. I think we see debris cleared and at least one public photo of concrete repair before the end of July. Blue Origin needs investor optics right now. They'll release something.
Jeff Bezos posting a hard hat selfie is not structural repair progress.
Okay, fair. I'll stipulate the selfie doesn't count.
So to close this out, if we're right, we're back in 30 days saying Blue Origin threaded the needle and Artemis 2028 is still alive, barely. If we're wrong,
this episode becomes Exhibit A for why you never bet on a program that just lost its only pad in year 1 of operations. Okay, that's a wrap on LC-24. The one thing I keep coming back to, Blue Origin blew up their only launch pad. No pad B, full stop.
And that single constraint, no fallback infrastructure, is what makes every downstream Artemis date suspect right now. The sofa through the doorway problem doesn't go away just because NASA wishes it would.
It really doesn't. And Blake's point about Blue Moon's outer diameter, nobody's published it. That silence is doing a lot of work.
The consensus says launcher swaps are straightforward. I'd pressure test that.
Hard. If this episode helped you cut through the noise on Artemis, share it with someone still wondering why we're going back to the moon. Subscribe wherever you listen. It genuinely helps.
And we made predictions this episode. We'll be back to see who got it right.
Hold us accountable. See you next week.